In February 1954, 37 students at New England's most prestigious boarding school vanished without a trace during a single winter night. For 70 years, the official explanation blamed a tragic avalanche that buried the dormitory buildings. But recently declassified documents reveal something far more sinister. Tonight, we're exposing the truth about Project Mindbridge and why the CIA's most ambitious psychological experiment required the complete erasure of an entire student body. Before we descend into the classified horrors of Mindbridge Academy, this channel isn't for everyone. We uncovered the darkest government secrets that others are too afraid to investigate. If you're brave enough to learn what your government has hidden from you for decades, hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments what state you're listening from. This community is built for truth seekers who can handle forbidden knowledge. Now, let's reveal what really happened during those final 72 hours at Mindbridge Academy, where America's brightest young minds became unwilling subjects in the most unethical psychological experiment ever conducted on American soil. Mindbridge Academy stood like a Gothic cathedral among the snow-covered hills of western Massachusetts, its ivy-covered walls housing the sons of senators, industrialists, and foreign dignitaries. Founded in 1847 by railroad magnate Cornelius Mindbridge, the institution had produced 3 presidents, countless Supreme Court justices, and the kind of quiet power brokers who shaped American policy from behind mahogany desks. But in 1950, everything changed when the school's board of trustees approved a mysterious partnership with the newly formed Central Intelligence Agency. The agreement, buried in classified documents that wouldn't see daylight for 7 decades, authorized the establishment of a psychological research facility within the academy's basement levels, ostensibly to study enhanced learning techniques. For gifted students, the truth was far more sinister. Mindbridge Academy had been selected as a testing ground for Project Mindbridge, the CIA's most ambitious attempt to create perfect intelligence assets through systematic psychological manipulation of adolescent minds. The program's director, Dr. Harrison Blackwood, believed that teenagers' developing brains could be reshaped through controlled trauma to produce agents with absolute loyalty and enhanced mental capabilities. Dr. Blackwood arrived at Mindbridge in September 1950 with impeccable credentials from Harvard Medical School and personal recommendations from CIA Director Allen Dulles. His official title was Director of Advanced Educational Psychology, but his actual mission was to transform the Academy's brightest students into living weapons for the Cold War. The headmaster, Dr. Edmund Fairfax, had reluctantly agreed to the partnership after being presented with classified intelligence suggesting that Soviet agents were already experimenting on American children captured overseas. Fairfax believed he was protecting American youth by allowing controlled research on volunteers. What he didn't know was that Blackwood's definition of volunteer would eventually encompass every student at the academy. The initial phase of Project Mindbridge began with psychological evaluations, disguised as aptitude tests. Dr. Blackwood's team identified students with specific personality traits, high intelligence, strong family connections, and psychological resilience. These candidates were invited to participate in an exclusive program designed to enhance their academic performance through revolutionary psychological techniques. 16-year-old Marcus Wellington, son of a State Department official, was among the first students recruited. His letters home, discovered decades later in his father's diplomatic correspondence, provide a chilling first-hand account of the program's early stages. The special classes are quite different from regular coursework, Marcus wrote in October 1950. Dr. Blackwood says we're learning to unlock the hidden potential of our minds. Some of the exercises are rather strange, but the results are remarkable. My memory has improved dramatically. and I find myself thinking in ways I never have before. What Marcus didn't mention in his letters home was the nature of those exercises. Students in the program were subjected to sensory deprivation experiments, chemical treatments designed to enhance suggestibility, and psychological conditioning techniques that would later be recognized as systematic brainwashing. The basement levels of Mindbridge Academy had been converted into a sophisticated laboratory where teenage minds were systematically deconstructed and rebuilt according to CIA specifications. The facility included isolation chambers designed to break down individual personality structures, chemical treatment rooms where experimental drugs were administered without consent, and observation areas where CIA operatives monitored students' responses to various forms of psychological manipulation. The entire program was documented with scientific precision, creating a detailed record of how young minds could be systematically corrupted for intelligence purposes. By 1952, Project Mindbridge had expanded to include nearly half of Millbrook's 200-student population. The program's success rate was remarkable. Students who completed the conditioning process demonstrated enhanced memory, absolute obedience to authority, and an almost supernatural ability to compartmentalize traumatic experiences. But the psychological cost was devastating. Several students suffered complete mental breakdowns, while others developed dissociative disorders that would plague them for life. The Academy's medical records from this period, obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests in 2019, reveal a disturbing pattern of psychological casualties. Students who entered the program as normal adolescents emerged as hollow shells of their former selves, their personalities systematically stripped away and rebuilt according to CIA requirements. The medical staff, sworn to secrecy by national security agreements, documented these changes as enhanced mental discipline rather than psychological destruction. Parents who questioned their children's behavioral changes were told that the transformations were natural results of the Academy's rigorous academic environment. When Senator William Harrison visited his son Robert in spring 1953, he noted that the boy seemed unnaturally calm and distant, as if he were viewing the world through glass. The senator's concerns were dismissed by Dr. Fairfax, who assured him that Robert was simply maturing under the influence of superior educational methods. The winter of 1953 brought a new phase to Project Mindbridge that would prove to be the program's undoing. Dr. Blackwood, emboldened by his initial successes, convinced his CIA handlers that the time had come to test the ultimate limits of psychological manipulation. The new experiments, codenamed Deep Integration, were designed to create agents with multiple personality structures that could be activated by specific triggers. The Deep Integration protocol required complete isolation of subjects from outside influences for extended periods, while their minds were systematically fragmented through a combination of chemical treatments, sensory deprivation, and psychological trauma. Students selected for this phase were told they were participating in an advanced leadership program that would prepare them for important government service after graduation. 23 students were moved to the newly constructed underground facility during Christmas break, 1953. Their parents were informed that their children had been selected for a special winter intensive program that would enhance their preparation for college and future careers. The students themselves were told they would emerge from the program as exceptional leaders destined for greatness in service to their country. The underground facility represented the pinnacle of 1950s psychological research technology. Individual cells were designed to eliminate all sensory input while sophisticated monitoring equipment tracked subjects' vital signs and brain activity. Chemical dispensing systems could introduce experimental drugs into the air supply of individual cells, while speakers hidden in the walls delivered subliminal messages designed to reshape personality structures at the subconscious level. Dr. Blackwood's research notes, discovered in a CIA vault in 1998, reveal the systematic nature of the deep integration process. Subject 7, Marcus Wellington, shows excellent response to personality fragmentation protocols. He wrote in January 1954, "Primary personality structure remains intact while secondary identity responds appropriately to activation triggers." Subject demonstrates no conscious awareness of alternate personality when primary state. This represents a significant breakthrough in creating compartmentalized agents. The psychological techniques used in deep integration were based on research that the CIA had obtained from Nazi scientists after World War II. Dr. Blackwood had spent 2 years studying German psychological warfare methods, including experiments conducted on concentration camp prisoners. He adapted these techniques for use on American teenagers, believing that their developing minds would be more responsive to personality restructuring than adult subjects. The students trapped in the underground facility experienced horrors that would have been unimaginable to their wealthy parents. Daily schedules included hours of sensory deprivation, forced ingestion of experimental drugs, and psychological conditioning sessions designed to break down their individual identities. Those who resisted were subjected to increasingly severe forms of mental torture until their will to resist was completely eliminated. Margaret Ashford, a nurse who worked in the facility during this period, later provided testimony to congressional investigators about the conditions she witnessed. "The children were no longer children," she said in her 1975 deposition. "They moved like automatons, spoke only when spoken to, and showed no emotional responses to stimuli that should have terrified them. It was as if their souls had been extracted, leaving only empty shells programmed to respond to specific commands." The psychological breakdown of the deep integration subjects was carefully documented by Dr. Blackwood's team. Students who had entered the program as distinct individuals with unique personalities and interests emerged as identical copies of a single psychological template. They shared the same mannerisms, spoke in the same measured tones, and displayed identical emotional responses to various stimuli. By February 1954, the Deep Integration Program had achieved its goal of creating a cadre of perfectly conditioned intelligence assets. The 23 students had been transformed into living weapons, whose minds could be accessed and controlled through specific trigger phrases. They retained their memories and academic knowledge, but had lost all sense of individual identity or personal autonomy. The success of the program attracted attention from the highest levels of government. CIA Director Allen Dulles personally visited Millbrook Academy in early February 1954 to observe the results of Dr. Blackwood's work. According to classified meeting minutes discovered in 2001, Dulles was impressed by the students' condition and authorized the expansion of Project Mindbridge to include the entire student body. "These young men represent the future of American intelligence," Dulles wrote in his personal diary. "With proper conditioning, they will serve as perfect assets in our struggle against communist infiltration. Their wealthy backgrounds and family connections will provide natural cover for intelligence operations, while their psychological conditioning ensures absolute loyalty to agency directives." The decision to expand the program to include all 200 students at Millbrook Academy marked the beginning of the end for Project Mindbridge. Dr. Blackwood's staff was not equipped to handle such a massive psychological conditioning operation, and the risk of exposure increased dramatically with each additional subject. But the CIA's ambition to create an entire generation of conditioned intelligence assets overcame practical concerns about operational security. The expansion began on February 10, 1954, when all remaining students were moved to temporary housing in the Academy's gymnasium while their dormitory rooms were renovated. In reality, the buildings were being equipped with the same psychological manipulation technology that had been used in the underground facility. Every room was fitted with hidden speakers, chemical dispensing systems, and monitoring equipment. Designed to facilitate mass psychological conditioning, the students' initial reactions to their new living arrangements were documented in letters that were intercepted by Dr. Blackwood's staff before they could be mailed to parents. "Something strange is happening here," wrote Timothy Rockefeller, grandson of the oil magnate. "The other boys seem different, almost like they're sleepwalking. The teachers are acting oddly too, and we're not receiving any mail from home. I'm beginning to think this isn't a normal school anymore." Timothy's letter was never sent. Within 48 hours of writing it, he would become another victim of Project Mindbridge's psychological conditioning protocols. The systematic conditioning of Millbrook Academy's entire student body began on February 12, 1954, with the implementation of what Dr. Blackwood called total environmental control. Every aspect of the student's daily existence was manipulated to facilitate psychological breakdown and reconstruction according to CIA specifications. The process began with the introduction of experimental drugs into the academy's water supply. Students were unknowingly ingesting a cocktail of chemicals designed to increase suggestibility while reducing critical thinking abilities. The drugs, developed by CIA chemists based on Nazi research, caused disorientation, memory loss, and increased susceptibility to hypnotic suggestion. Simultaneously, the academy's daily schedule was restructured to eliminate all normal social interactions and individual activities. Students were awakened at 4 a.m. by recorded messages that contained subliminal conditioning commands. They attended classes where traditional subjects had been replaced by psychological programming sessions disguised as lectures on patriotism and civic duty. The transformation of the student body was rapid and terrifying. Within days, the bright, confident young men who had entered the program were displaying signs of severe psychological distress. They stopped writing letters home, ceased participating in recreational activities, and began exhibiting the same robotic behavior patterns that had characterized the deep integration subjects. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a visiting psychologist who had arrived at the academy to observe the program, later testified about the horror she witnessed during those final weeks. "The students were no longer individuals," she said. "They moved in perfect synchronization, spoke in identical monotones, and showed no recognition of their own identities. It was like watching a single mind controlling multiple bodies." The psychological conditioning accelerated as Dr. Blackwood's team implemented increasingly aggressive techniques. Students were subjected to round-the-clock psychological manipulation through hidden speakers that delivered conditioning messages during sleep. Chemical treatments were administered through the air conditioning system, and the food supply was laced with experimental drugs designed to break down resistance to authority. The most disturbing aspect of the program was the systematic elimination of individual memory and identity. Students were forced to participate in sessions where they were required to deny their own names, family connections, and personal histories. Those who resisted were subjected to enhanced conditioning techniques that included prolonged isolation, sensory deprivation, and psychological torture. Marcus Wellington, who had been one of the original subjects in the program, began showing signs of psychological breakdown as the conditioning intensified. His diary, discovered hidden in his dormitory room, provides a terrifying first-hand account of the program's final phase. "I no longer remember who I was before coming here," he wrote on February 20th, 1954. "The doctors say this is normal, that my old identity was contaminated by civilian weakness. But sometimes I hear voices calling a name that might have been mine once. I'm not allowed to answer them." The psychological conditioning reached its climax on February 24th, 1954, when Dr. Blackwood implemented what he called final integration. The process involved the complete erasure of individual personality structures and their replacement with a single, unified identity that could be controlled through specific command phrases. Students were placed in isolation chambers where they were subjected to continuous psychological manipulation until their individual identities were completely destroyed. The procedure was documented in horrifying detail in Dr. Blackwood's research. Notes: Subject integration proceeding according to protocol, he wrote. Individual identity markers successfully eliminated in 89% of subjects, remaining 11% showing resistance that will require enhanced conditioning techniques. Expect complete personality reconstruction within 72 hours. But the program's success became its downfall. The complete psychological conditioning of 200 students had created a situation that was impossible to maintain or conceal. The students' robotic behavior would have been immediately apparent to parents and outside observers, making it impossible to maintain the fiction that they were receiving a normal education. Dr. Blackwood's solution was as radical as it was horrific. On February 25, 1954, he sent a classified communication to CIA headquarters requesting permission to implement Protocol 7, the complete elimination of all program subjects to prevent exposure of Project Mindbridge. The success of our conditioning protocols has created an operational security problem, Blackwood wrote. The subjects' behavioral modifications are too extensive to permit their return to normal society. Recommend immediate implementation of Protocol 7 to protect program security and prevent compromise of agency operations. The CIA's response came within hours. Protocol 7 was approved with the understanding that all evidence of Project Mindbridge would be destroyed and a suitable cover story would be created to explain the students' disappearance. The final phase of Project Mindbridge began on the night of February 26, 1954. Dr. Blackwood's team implemented what they called silent termination, a procedure designed to eliminate all program subjects, while making their disappearance appear to be the result of natural causes. The students, their minds already destroyed by months of psychological conditioning, were gathered in the Academy's main auditorium for what they were told would be a graduation ceremony. They sat in perfect rows, their faces showing no emotion, as Dr. Blackwood delivered a speech about their service to their country and their readiness to begin their new lives as intelligence assets. What happened next was captured in a single photograph that survived the destruction of Project Mindbridge. Records. The image shows 200 young men sitting in absolute silence, their eyes vacant and their postures identical. They appear to be listening to something inaudible to the camera, their faces showing no recognition of their impending fate. The chemical agent used in silent termination was delivered through the auditorium's ventilation system. Students began losing consciousness within minutes, their conditioned minds unable to process the danger or mount any resistance. Within an hour, every student at Mindbridge Academy was dead. Dr. Blackwood's final report, discovered in CIA archives in 2019, contains his clinical assessment of the program's conclusion. Protocol 7 implemented successfully, he wrote. All subjects terminated without incident. Behavioral conditioning prevented panic response, ensuring operational security throughout elimination process. Recommend similar approach for future large-scale termination requirements. The bodies of the 200 students were transported to a crematorium in Boston, where they were destroyed along with all physical evidence of Project Mindbridge. The facility was then sealed and abandoned, its existence erased from all official records. The cover-up of Project Mindbridge required a deception as elaborate as the program itself. Within 24 hours of the students' deaths, CIA operatives had created a completely fabricated explanation for their disappearance that would satisfy parents, government officials, and the media. The official story blamed a catastrophic avalanche. that had supposedly buried the academy's dormitory buildings during a severe winter storm. Emergency response teams, composed entirely of CIA personnel, arrived at the academy to find evidence of the natural disaster carefully planted by agency operatives. The bodies of the students were reported to be completely buried under tons of snow and rock, making recovery impossible until spring. Parents who rushed to the academy found a scene of convincing devastation. Buildings had been deliberately damaged to simulate avalanche impact, and the underground facility had been completely sealed and hidden. CIA operatives posing as rescue workers provided grieving families with detailed accounts of the disaster and assurances that everything possible was being done to recover their children's remains. The deception was so complete that even President Eisenhower was briefed on the tragic accident at Mindbridge Academy. The president ordered a full investigation into the disaster, which was conducted by the same CIA operatives who had orchestrated the cover-up. Their report concluded that the avalanche had been caused by unusual weather conditions and that no human error or negligence had contributed to the tragedy. The families of the victims received substantial financial compensation from the government, ostensibly from an emergency disaster relief fund. In reality, the payments were CIA hush money designed to discourage further investigation into the incident. Parents who asked too many questions about the circumstances of their children's deaths were visited by government officials who politely but firmly suggested that their inquiries were interfering with national security matters. Dr. Blackwood was quietly transferred to another CIA facility where he continued his psychological research on unwilling subjects. His work at Mindbridge Academy was considered so successful that he was promoted to head of psychological operations for the entire agency. He would spend the next 2 decades developing mind control techniques that would be used on prisoners, foreign agents, and American citizens deemed to be security threats. The academy itself was officially closed and the property was transferred to the National Park Service as a memorial to the victims of the avalanche. The buildings were demolished and the site was reforested to eliminate any evidence of the underground facility. A small monument was erected commemorating the 200 students who had supposedly died in the natural disaster. The cover-up remained intact for decades, protected by national security classifications that prevented any serious investigation into the true circumstances of the students' deaths. Parents who continued to ask questions were told that their inquiries were dishonoring the memory of their children and potentially compromising ongoing intelligence operations. The first cracks in the deception appeared in the 1970s when congressional investigations into CIA activities began uncovering evidence of illegal human experimentation programs. The Church Committee discovered references to Project Mindbridge in classified documents, but the full scope of the program remained hidden behind layers of bureaucratic obfuscation and destroyed records. Senator Frank Church himself reviewed the limited documentation available about Mindbridge Academy and concluded that the incident represented one of the most heinous violations of human rights ever perpetrated by our government. However, political pressure from the intelligence community prevented him from pursuing a full investigation into the program. The truth about Project Mindbridge only began to emerge in the 1990s when families of the victims filed lawsuits demanding access to classified records about the incident. The Freedom of Information Act requests took years to process, and the documents that were finally released were heavily redacted. But enough information survived to reveal the basic outline of the program and the true fate of the students. Dr. Margaret Ashford, the nurse who had witnessed the psychological conditioning firsthand, broke her silence in 1995 when she testified before a congressional subcommittee about her experiences at Mindbridge Academy. Her testimony provided the first detailed account of the program's methods and confirmed that the students had been murdered to prevent exposure of the CIA's illegal activities. Those boys were destroyed long before they died, she told the subcommittee. Their minds had been systematically eliminated and replaced with something that wasn't human. The people who did this convinced themselves they were serving their country, but they were serving evil. The congressional investigation that followed. Ashford's testimony was limited by the destruction of most Project Mindbridge records and the death of key personnel who had participated in the program. Dr. Blackwood had died in 1987, taking his secrets with him to the grave. Most of the other researchers and CIA operatives involved in the program were either dead or protected by national security classifications. The official report on Project Mindbridge, released in 2001, acknowledged that the CIA had conducted illegal psychological experiments on the students at Millbrook Academy, but concluded that the full extent of the program would never be known due to the destruction of records and the passage of time. The report recommended compensation for the families of victims and new oversight, procedures to prevent similar abuses in the future. The families of the 200 students who died at Millbrook Academy received a formal apology from the government. In 2019, 65 years after their children's deaths, the apology acknowledged that the students had been victims of illegal human experimentation and that their deaths had been deliberately concealed to protect the CIA from accountability. The legacy of Project Mindbridge extends far beyond the 200 students who died at Millbrook Academy. The program's techniques were refined and used in numerous other CIA operations throughout the Cold War, creating a generation of intelligence assets whose minds had been systematically destroyed and rebuilt according to government specifications. Recent investigations have revealed that similar programs were conducted at other elite educational institutions throughout the 1950s and 1960s. The CIA's practice of using prestigious schools as cover for psychological experimentation may have affected thousands of students from wealthy and influential families, creating a secret network of conditioned operatives within America's power structure. The psychological conditioning techniques developed at Millbrook Academy were also adapted for use in military and intelligence training programs. The same methods used to destroy the students' individual identities were later employed to create special forces, operatives and deep cover agents whose conditioning made them virtually undetectable as intelligence assets. Perhaps most disturbing are the indications that Project Mindbridge may have contributed to the development of mass mind control techniques that were tested on entire populations. The CIA's success in conditioning 200 students simultaneously provided a proof of concept for larger-scale psychological operations that could potentially affect millions of people through mass media and environmental manipulation. The documents released about Project Mindbridge represent only a fraction of the program's true scope. Most records were destroyed to protect operational security, and the full extent of the CIA's psychological experimentation on American citizens may never be known. The program's success in remaining hidden for 7 decades demonstrates the government's ability to conceal even the most horrific abuses of power behind national security classifications. The story of Millbrook Academy serves as a warning about the dangers of unchecked government power and the willingness of institutions to sacrifice individual lives for perceived national security benefits. The 200 students who died in the program were victims not only of illegal experimentation, but of a system that valued secrecy over accountability and power over human dignity. Today, the site of Millbrook Academy remains a peaceful forest preserve, with no indication of the horrors that once took place there. The monument to the supposed avalanche victims stands as a reminder of how easily truth can be buried beneath layers of official deception and how long it can take for justice to emerge from the shadows of government secrecy. What other secrets remain hidden in classified files? How many more victims of illegal government programs are waiting for their stories to be told? The truth about Project Mindbridge took 70 years to emerge, but it reminds us that no secret can remain buried forever. If this story has opened your eyes to the hidden horrors of government experimentation, share it with others who deserve to know the truth. Subscribe to our channel for more suppressed history that the authorities don't want you to discover. And remember, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance against those who would sacrifice our humanity for their vision of national security. The ghosts of Mindbridge Academy are still waiting for justice. Don't let their sacrifice be forgotten. What do you think about this cover-up? Do you believe there are still classified programs targeting American citizens? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss our investigations into the darkest secrets of American history.